The Zodiac Killer, a serial killer never caught. In the annals of American true crime, few names evoke the same sense of dread, fascination, and enduring mystery as the Zodiac Killer. For over half a century, this unidentified serial murderer has haunted the collective consciousness of the United States, leaving a trail of victims, cryptic messages, and unanswered questions that have stumped law enforcement, amateur sleuths, and true crime enthusiasts alike. Unlike many serial killers whose identities are eventually uncovered through DNA evidence, witness testimony, or a single fatal mistake, the Zodiac Killer vanished into the shadows, his true name and motives remaining hidden to this day. What makes the Zodiac case so compelling and so frustrating is not just the brutality of his crimes, but the way he taunted authorities and the public with coded letters, threats, and boasts, turning his killing spree into a twisted game of cat and mouse. He claimed responsibility for dozens of murders, though only 5 are officially confirmed, and his ability to evade capture for decades has made him one of the most infamous unsolved serial killer cases in history. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer. His crimes, his taunts, the relentless investigation that spanned generations, the countless suspects who have been named and dismissed, and the enduring legacy of a killer who never faced justice. To understand the Zodiac Killer, we must first journey back to the late 1960s, a time of social upheaval, cultural change, and growing anxiety in the United States. The 1960s were marked by the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, and a general sense of unease. And it was in this context that the Zodiac began his reign of terror. His crimes were concentrated in Northern California, primarily in the San Francisco Bay Area, a region known for its natural beauty, progressive culture, and vibrant communities, making the killer's presence all the more jarring. The Zodiac's modus operandi was inconsistent in some ways, but there were recurring elements that linked his crimes. He targeted young couples, often in remote or semi-remote locations, used both firearms and knives, and left behind cryptic messages that he claimed contained clues to his identity. What set him apart from other serial killers of the era, however, was his willingness to communicate directly with the media and law enforcement, sending letters to newspapers that were filled with taunts, threats, and complex ciphers. These letters not only kept the case in the public eye, but also made the Zodiac a household name, turning him into a symbol of the unknown dangers that lurked even in the most idyllic corners of America. The first confirmed victims of the Zodiac Killer were David Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, a young couple from Vallejo, California. On the evening of December 20, 1968, Faraday and Jensen parked their Rambler station wagon on Lake Herman Road, a secluded stretch of road that was a popular spot for teenagers to gather and spend time together. The area was surrounded by fields and trees, with little traffic and few streetlights, making it an ideal location for someone looking to commit a crime without being seen. At approximately 10:15 p.m., a passing motorist noticed the couple's car parked on the side of the road and saw a man standing nearby, but did not think much of it at the time. It was not until later that night, around 11:00 p.m., that another motorist discovered the gruesome scene. Faraday and Jensen were both shot to death inside their car. Faraday had been shot once in the head, while Jensen had been shot 5 times in the back. The windows of the car were shattered, and shell casings from a .22 caliber rifle were found at the scene. There were no signs of a struggle, suggesting that the killer had approached the car unexpectedly and opened fire without warning. The Vallejo Police Department launched an investigation, but with no witnesses, no suspects, and no clear motive, the case quickly went cold. At the time, no one could have predicted that this would be the first in a series of murders that would span years and confound investigators for decades. The Zodiac struck again just over 6 months later, on July 4, 1969, in Vallejo. This time, his victims were Darlene Ferrin, 22, and Michael Majow, 19. Ferrin and Majow were parked in the parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park, another popular spot for couples, when a man approached their car. The man was described as being in his late 20s or early 30s, with a stocky build, short brown hair, and a crew cut. He was wearing glasses and a dark jacket, and he carried a flashlight and a 9 semi-automatic pistol. The man approached the passenger side of the car, shone the flashlight into the vehicle, and ordered Ferrin and Majow to get out. When they refused, he opened fire, shooting Ferrin 5 times and Majow 4 times. The killer then walked away from the car, but before he left the scene, he returned and fired additional shots into the vehicle, as if ensuring that his victims were dead. Miraculously, Majow survived the attack, though he suffered severe injuries and was left with permanent disabilities. Ferrin, however, died at the scene. A witness reported seeing a white Chevrolet Impala leaving the park shortly after the shooting, but the description was too vague to be of much use to investigators. Once again, the Vallejo Police Department was left with few leads, and the case seemed destined to remain unsolved. But the Zodiac killer was not content to let his crimes go unnoticed. On July 31, 1969, the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner each received a handwritten letter from an unknown sender. The letters were identical in content, and each contained a cryptogram consisting of 408 characters made up of letters, numbers, and symbols. The sender claimed to be the killer responsible for the murders of Faraday, Jensen, and Ferrin, and he threatened to kill more people unless the newspapers published his cryptogram on their front pages. "I will cruise around and pick off all stray people or couples that are alone, then move on to kill some more," the letter read. "If you do not print this cipher by the afternoon of Og-1, I will go on a kill rampage and kill 5 people instead of 1 per week." The newspapers, fearing for public safety, complied with the killer's demands, publishing the cryptogram on their front pages. The sender also included a warning: The cipher contained herewith contains my identity. If you can crack it, you will have me. This was the first time the killer had identified himself as the Zodiac, a name that would soon become synonymous with terror. The cryptogram, which came to be known as the 408 cipher, was a challenge to law enforcement and the public alike, and it sparked a nationwide effort to crack its code. The 408 cipher was cracked just over a week later, on August 8, 1969, by a husband and wife team from Salinas, California, Donald and Betty Harden. The Hardens were amateur cryptographers who had been fascinated by the cipher and had spent hours working to decode it. They discovered that the cipher was a simple substitution cipher, where each symbol represented a letter of the alphabet. The decoded message read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest. Because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise. And all the people I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name, because you will try to slow down or stop my collection of slaves for my afterlife." The final line of the cipher contained a jumble of letters, EB, TMETHHPITI, that remains undecoded to this day, leading some to speculate that it was a red herring, a random sequence intended to confuse investigators, while others believe it contains a hidden clue to the Zodiac's identity. The decoded message offered no concrete information about the killer's name, location, or appearance, but it provided a chilling insight into his twisted psyche. A man who derived pleasure from killing saw himself as superior to his victims and believed that his murders would grant him power in the afterlife. This glimpse into the Zodiac's mind only deepened the public's fear and fascination, and it reinforced the idea that this was no ordinary serial killer, but a calculating, manipulative individual who took delight in taunting those who sought to catch him. The Zodiac was quick to respond to THE Chinese letter of his cipher, sending another letter to the San Francisco Examiner on August 7, 1969. This letter, written in the same distinctive handwriting as the previous ones, began with the words, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." It was the first time the killer had explicitly used the Zodiac name in a greeting, solidifying his identity as the mysterious murderer terrorizing Northern California. In the letter, the Zodiac provided specific details about the murders of Faraday, Jensen, and Farron, details that had not been released to the public, proving beyond a doubt that he was indeed the killer. He referenced the make and model of Faraday's car, the number of shots fired, and even the fact that Jensen had been shot while trying to flee the vehicle. "I shot them," he boasted. "I also shot the other two last 4th of July. If you want more details, just let me know. I will be glad to supply them." The letter also included a taunt directed at law enforcement. "The police shall never catch me, because because I am too clever for them. This letter was a clear message. The Zodiac was in control, and he was enjoying every moment of his cat-and-mouse game with the authorities. He also reaffirmed his threat to kill more people, warning that he would continue his spree unless his demands were met. Though he did not specify any new demands beyond the publication of his previous cipher, the Zodiac's next attack came just over a month later, on September 27, 1969, at Lake Berryessa, a large reservoir located in Napa County, California. This attack was different from his previous ones in several key ways. It took place in broad daylight. The victims were a young couple picnicking in a remote area, and he used a knife instead of a gun, marking the first time he had used a blade in his killings. The victims were Brian Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Shepard, 22, both students at Pacific Union College. Hartnell and Shepard had driven to Lake Berryessa for a picnic, parking their car near a secluded cove known as Twin Oak Ridge. At approximately 6:30 p.m., a man approached them, wearing a black hood with eye holes cut out, resembling an executioner's mask, and a cross-circle symbol, later known as the Zodiac's signature, pinned to his chest. The man was carrying a gun and a knife, and he told Hartnell and Shepard that he was an escaped convict who had killed a guard and needed their car and money to flee to Mexico. He ordered Shepard to tie Hartnell's hands behind his back with plastic rope he had brought with him, then tied Shepard's hands himself, tightening the knots to ensure they could not escape. Hartnell later recalled that he initially thought the man was a robber, but his demeanor soon changed. He became more aggressive, and it was clear that he had no intention of letting them live. After binding the couple, the Zodiac forced them to lie on the ground, then began stabbing them repeatedly with a large hunting knife. Hartnell was stabbed 6 times in the back, while Shepard was stabbed 10 times in the back and chest. The killer then walked back to Hartnell's car, took a black felt-tip pen, and drew his cross-circle symbol on the driver's side door, along with the dates of his previous murders: Vallejo 12/20/60 8/7/4/69, and the date of the Lake Berryessa attack, 9/27/69. He also wrote the number 2 below the symbol, indicating that this was his second attack, though it was his third confirmed murder. After finishing his message, the Zodiac fled the scene on foot, leaving Hartnell and Shepard for dead. Miraculously, both victims survived the attack, though they suffered severe injuries. Hartnell endured a long recovery, requiring multiple surgeries to repair the damage to his back, while Shepard suffered irreversible damage to her lungs and kidneys. She died 2 days later, on September 29, 1969, in a Napa hospital, becoming the Zodiac's 4th confirmed victim. Hartnell, however, survived to become a key witness, providing investigators with a detailed description of the killer's appearance and demeanor, details that would later become crucial in identifying potential suspects. The Lake Berryessa attack marked a significant shift in the Zodiac's modus operandi. Unlike his previous attacks, which had occurred at night and involved firearms, this attack was carried out in broad daylight with a knife, suggesting that the Zodiac was becoming more bold and confident in his ability to evade capture. The use of a mask also indicated that he was taking precautions to hide his identity, while the message on the car door was a clear taunt to law enforcement, a way of claiming responsibility and asserting his dominance. Witnesses in the area reported seeing a white car parked near the scene of the attack, and a man matching the Zodiac's description was seen walking away from Lake Berryessa shortly after the stabbings. However, as with previous attacks, the descriptions were too vague to lead to any concrete suspects, and the Zodiac once again managed to escape without being identified. Just over a month later, on October 11, 1969, the Zodiac struck again, this time in the heart of San Francisco. His victim was Paul Stein, 29, a taxi driver who was working his usual route in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. At approximately 9:55 p.m., Stein picked up a passenger at the corner of Mason and Geary Streets, a man described as being in his late 20s or early 30s, with a stocky build, short brown hair, and glasses, matching the description provided by Michael Mage and Brian Hartnell. The passenger directed Stein to drive to Cherry Street, a quiet, residential street in Presidio Heights. When they arrived at their destination, the passenger pulled a 9 semi-automatic pistol and shot Stein once in the head, killing him instantly. The killer then took Stein's wallet and car keys, wiped down the interior of the taxi to remove any fingerprints, and fled the scene. A group of teenagers who were watching from a nearby house saw the killer leave the taxi and called the police, providing a detailed description of his appearance. White male, 58 to 510, tall, stocky build, short brown hair, glasses, and wearing a dark jacket and dark pants. The police responded within minutes, but the killer had already vanished into the night, disappearing into the nearby Presidio, a large military base that provided ample cover for his escape. The murder of Paul Stein was significant for several reasons. It was the Zodiac's first murder in a major urban area, a far cry from the remote locations of his previous attacks, and it showed that he was willing to kill in a crowded, populated neighborhood, something that increased public fear and put pressure on law enforcement to catch him. It was also the first time the Zodiac had targeted a single victim, rather than a couple, suggesting that his modus operandi was evolving, and that no one was safe from his wrath. Additionally, the witness accounts from the teenagers provided the most detailed description of the Zodiac to date, giving investigators a clearer picture of the man they were hunting. The police launched a massive manhunt in the Presidio and the surrounding neighborhoods, but despite their efforts, they found no trace of the killer. The only evidence left behind was a single fingerprint on the taxi's door handle, but it did not match any prints in the FBI's database at the time. Once again, the Zodiac wasted no time in claiming responsibility for the murder. On October 13, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter from the Zodiac, postmarked October 12, which contained a piece of Paul Stein's bloodstained shirt. The letter read, "I am the Zodiac. I killed the taxi driver. I shot him in the head. I took his wallet and his car keys. I am not going to tell you my name because you will try to stop me. I will kill again. I will kill more people than ever before. You will never catch me." The inclusion of the bloodstained shirt was a grotesque taunt, a way for the Zodiac to prove that he was indeed the killer, and to remind the public and law enforcement of his power. The letter also included a new cipher, consisting of 340 characters, later known as the 340 cipher, which the Zodiac claimed contained clues to his identity, unlike the 408 cipher, which was a simple substitution cipher. The 340 cipher was far more complex, using a combination of symbols, letters, and numbers that baffled cryptographers for decades. To this day, the 340 cipher remains unsolved, though numerous attempts have been made to crack it using modern technology and advanced cryptography. Zodiac's taunts continued throughout the fall of 1969, with more letters sent to newspapers and law enforcement. In one letter, he threatened to blow up a school bus, claiming that he would kill as many children as possible if his demands were not met. He even included a crude diagram of a bomb, though he never followed through on the threat. In another letter, he boasted about his ability to evade capture, writing, "The police are so stupid, they will never catch me. I am too smart for them. I know all their tricks, and I can outrun them any day." These letters were not just acts of taunting. They were also a way for the Zodiac to maintain control over the narrative, to keep himself in the public eye, and to feed his ego. He thrived on the attention, and each letter was a reminder that he was in charge, that he could kill at will, and that no one could stop him. The public's fear continued to grow, with parents keeping their children indoors, couples avoiding remote areas, and taxi drivers refusing to pick up passengers in certain neighborhoods. The Zodiac had effectively turned Northern California into a state of panic, and law enforcement was under immense pressure to solve the case in response to the growing panic and the Zodiac's taunts. Law enforcement agencies from across Northern California joined forces to form a task force dedicated to catching the killer. The task force included officers from the Vallejo Police Department, the Napa County Sheriff's Office, the San Francisco Police Department, and the FBI. Investigators worked around the clock, interviewing witnesses, analyzing evidence, and following up on every lead, no matter how small. They reviewed thousands of tips from the public, checked the backgrounds of hundreds of suspects, and used the latest forensic technology available at the time to analyze the evidence left behind by the Zodiac. However, despite their best efforts, the task force struggled to make progress. The Zodiac left very little physical evidence at his crime scenes, no fingerprints, except for the one on Stein's taxi. No DNA, no hair or fiber evidence, and the witness descriptions, while detailed, were not enough to identify a single suspect. The ciphers, particularly the unsolved 340 cipher, provided no clear clues, and the Zodiac's letters, while filled with taunts, offered no concrete information about his identity or location. One of the biggest challenges facing investigators was the Zodiac's ability to remain anonymous. Unlike many serial killers who leave behind patterns or personal items that can be traced back to them, the Zodiac was meticulous in covering his tracks. He wore gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, wiped down surfaces to remove any evidence, and used a mask to hide his face during the Lake Berryessa attack. He also used different weapons for different attacks. A .22 caliber rifle for the Faraday-Jensen murders, a 9 pistol for the Fahrenheit and Stein murders, and a hunting knife for the Hartnell Shepard attack, making it difficult to link the crimes to a single weapon or source. Additionally, the Zodiac's letters were written in a distinctive handwriting style, but handwriting analysis at the time was not as advanced as it is today, and it was unable to identify the writer. The lack of physical evidence and the Zodiac's careful planning made it nearly impossible for investigators to narrow down the list of suspects, and the case soon became a frustrating dead end. As the investigation dragged on, the Zodiac continued to send letters, though they became less frequent. In November 1969, he sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle in which he claimed to have killed 11 people, though only 5 were officially confirmed. He also included a new cipher, known as the 13-symbol cipher, which was much shorter than the previous ones, consisting of only 13 characters. Like the 340 cipher, this cipher remains unsolved, and its meaning is still a mystery. In December 1969, the Zodiac sent a Christmas card to the San Francisco Chronicle, featuring his cross-circle symbol and the words, "Merry Christmas. I hope you have a nice day. I have killed 12 people. I will kill more." The card was another taunt, a way for the Zodiac to remind the public that he was still at large and that he had no intention of stopping. However, after the Christmas card, the Zodiac's letters became less frequent, and by the early 1970s, they had all but stopped. This led some investigators to speculate that the Zodiac had died, moved out of the area, or been incarcerated for another crime, while others believed that he had simply grown tired of his cat-and-mouse game and had retired from killing. But there was no way to know for sure, and the case remained open, with investigators continuing to follow up on leads and search for clues. Over the years, dozens of suspects have been named in the Zodiac case, each with varying degrees of evidence linking them to the murders. One of the most prominent suspects was Arthur Lee Allen, a former schoolteacher and convicted sex offender who lived in Northern California during the time of the Zodiac's murders. Allen was first identified as a suspect in 1971, after a friend reported that Allen had made incriminating statements about the Zodiac killings. According to the friend, Allen had boasted about killing people, had a collection of weapons similar to those used by the Zodiac, and had a fascination with cryptography. Allen also matched the witness descriptions of the Zodiac. He was a white male, in his late 20s, early 30s at the time of the murders, stocky build, short brown hair, and wore glasses. Additionally, Allen owned a white Chevrolet Impala, which matched the witness description of the car seen leaving the Blue Rock Springs Park shooting. Investigators searched Allen's home and found a variety of items that seemed to link him to the Zodiac, including a typewriter similar to the one used to write some of the Zodiac's letters, a cross-circle symbol drawn on a piece of paper, and a copy of a book about cryptography. However, despite this evidence, there was no concrete proof that Allen was the Zodiac. Fingerprint tests showed that Allen's prints did not match the fingerprint found on Paul Stein's taxi, and DNA tests conducted later, using samples from Allen's exhumed body, did not match any DNA evidence found at the crime scenes. Allen died in 1992, and while he remains one of the most popular suspects, he was never officially charged with the Zodiac murders. Another prominent suspect was Richard Gaykowski, a former journalist who worked for the San Francisco Chronicle during the time of the Zodiac's killings. Gaykowski was identified as a suspect in the 1990s after investigators noticed similarities between his handwriting and the Zodiac's letters. He also matched the witness descriptions of the Zodiac, and he had a history of mental illness and violent behavior. Additionally, Gaykowski was known to have been in the areas where the Zodiac's murders occurred at the time of the crimes, and he had a fascination with the Zodiac case. However, like Arthur Lee Allen, there was no concrete evidence linking Gaykowski to the murders. DNA tests conducted on Gaykowski's remains, he died in 2004, did not match any DNA evidence from the crime scenes, and handwriting analysis was inconclusive, while some amateur sleuths and investigators remain convinced that Gaykowski was the Zodiac. He was never officially charged, and his connection to the case remains unproven. In recent years, a new suspect has emerged, Gary Francis Post, a former U.S. Air Force veteran who died in 2018. In 2021, a group of amateur investigators known as the Case Breakers claimed to have identified Post as the Zodiac killer, citing a variety of evidence, including DNA samples, weapon matching, and photo analysis. According to the Case Breakers, Post's DNA matches DNA evidence found at the crime scenes, and he owned weapons similar to those used by the Zodiac. They also claim that Post had a distinctive scar on his forehead that matches a scar described by witnesses who saw the Zodiac. Additionally, the Case Breakers say that Post gave away a large collection of weapons and ammunition before his death, which included items that could be linked to the Zodiac's crimes. However, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies have not confirmed these claims, and many experts have questioned the validity of the evidence. The FBI has stated that the Zodiac case remains open, and they have not identified any suspect as the definitive Zodiac killer. While Post has gained widespread attention as a potential suspect, there is still no concrete proof that he was the killer, and the case remains unsolved. Other suspects over the years have included Earl Van Best Jr., a convicted child molester with a history of violence, Lawrence Kane, a man with a criminal record who matched the witness descriptions of the Zodiac, and Robert Graysmith, a former cartoonist for the San Francisco Chronicle, who wrote a book about the Zodiac case and was himself suspected by some investigators, though he has always denied any involvement. Each of these suspects has had some evidence linking them to the case, but none have had enough concrete proof to be charged with the murders. The sheer number of suspects and the lack of definitive evidence have made it nearly impossible for investigators to narrow down the list and identify the Zodiac killer, leaving the case mired in uncertainty. One of the key challenges in solving the Zodiac case has been the lack of DNA evidence. During the 1960s and 1970s, forensic technology was not as advanced as it is today, and investigators were not able to collect and analyze DNA evidence from crime scenes in the way that they can now. While some DNA samples were collected from the Zodiac's letters, from saliva on the envelopes and stamps, these samples were degraded and contaminated over time, making it difficult to obtain a clear DNA profile. In recent years, advances in DNA technology have allowed investigators to reanalyze these samples, but so far, no matches have been found in DNA databases. The FBI has also tried to use familial DNA testing, which looks for relatives of the Zodiac in DNA databases. But this has also yielded no results. Without a clear DNA profile, it is nearly impossible to definitively link any suspect to the crimes, leaving the case stuck in a stalemate. Another challenge has been the Zodiac's use of ciphers. While the 408 cipher was cracked, the 340 cipher and the 13 symbol cipher remain unsolved, and many believe that these ciphers contain crucial clues to the Zodiac's identity. Over the years, countless cryptographers, amateur sleuths, and even government agencies have tried to crack these ciphers, using everything from manual analysis to advanced computer algorithms. In 2020, a team of amateur cryptographers claimed to have cracked the 340 cipher, but their solution was widely discredited by experts who argued that it did not follow the Zodiac's established cipher patterns. To this day, the 340 cipher remains one of the greatest unsolved cryptological mysteries in history, and it is possible that it holds the key to identifying the Zodiac killer. If the cipher is ever cracked, it could provide the concrete evidence needed to finally solve the case. But for now, it remains a frustrating enigma. The Zodiac case has also been plagued by hoaxes and false confessions over the years. Since the 1960s, hundreds of people have claimed to be the Zodiac killer or to have information about the killer's identity. But nearly all of these claims have have been proven false. Some of these hoaxes were perpetrated by people seeking attention, while others were the work of mentally ill individuals. For example, in 1969, a man called a television talk show claiming to be the Zodiac and arranged to meet with a lawyer, but he never showed up, and it was later revealed that he was a patient at a mental hospital. In another case, a man confessed to the Zodiac murders in the 1980s, but his confession was proven false when DNA tests showed that he was not the killer. These hoaxes have wasted countless hours of law enforcement's time and resources, diverting attention away from legitimate leads and making it even harder to solve the case. They have also added to the confusion and mystery surrounding the Zodiac, making it difficult for the public and investigators alike to separate fact from fiction. Despite the challenges, the investigation into the Zodiac killer has never officially been closed. Law enforcement agencies in Northern California continue to follow up on leads, reanalyze evidence, and use new technology to try to solve the case. In 2007, the FBI reopened the Zodiac case, citing advances in forensic technology that could help identify the killer. Since then, investigators have re-examined DNA evidence, reanalyzed the Zodiac's letters and ciphers, and interviewed new witnesses. In 2023, the FBI announced that they were still actively investigating the case, and that they were using new DNA testing methods to try to obtain a clear profile from the evidence. While progress has been slow, investigators remain hopeful that one day the Zodiac killer will be identified and justice will be served for his victims. The impact of the Zodiac killer on American culture and true crime history cannot be overstated. The case has inspired countless books, movies, television shows, and documentaries, each trying to unravel the mystery of the Zodiac and tell the story of his crimes. One of the most famous works inspired by the Zodiac is Robert Graysmith's 1986 book, Zodiac, which details his own investigation into the case and became a bestseller. The book was later adapted into a 2007 film directed by David Fincher, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Mark Ruffalo, and Robert Downey Jr., which was praised for its accuracy and attention to detail. The film brought the Zodiac case to a new generation of viewers, reigniting public interest in the mystery and sparking new debates about the killer's identity. Other films and television shows inspired by the Zodiac include Dirty Harry, 1971, which features a villain loosely based on the Zodiac, and numerous true crime documentaries that explore the case in detail. The Zodiac has also become a cultural icon, representing the ultimate unsolved mystery in true crime. His cross-circle symbol has become synonymous with terror and intrigue, and it is often used in popular culture to represent serial killers and unsolved crimes. The Zodiac's taunts, ciphers, and ability to evade capture have made him a figure of fascination for true crime enthusiasts who continue to debate his identity and motives decades after his last known murder. amateur sleuths from around the world have dedicated their lives to solving the Zodiac case, creating online forums, blogs, and social media groups to share information, discuss theories, and analyze evidence. These amateur investigators have uncovered new leads and re-examined old evidence, often bringing attention to details that law enforcement missed. While many of their theories are unproven, their dedication has helped to keep the case alive and ensure that the Zodiac's victims are not forgotten. The victims of the Zodiac killer David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stein are often overshadowed by the mystery of the killer himself. But their lives and legacies are an important part of the story. Each of these individuals had their own dreams, aspirations, and loved ones, and their lives were cut short by a brutal, unknown killer. David Faraday was a promising student who loved music and planned to attend college. Betty Lou Jensen was a popular teenager who enjoyed spending time with her friends and family. Darlene Ferrin was a young mother who worked as a waitress and loved to dance. Cecilia Shepard was a dedicated student who planned to become a nurse. Paul Stein was a hardworking taxi driver who was known for his kindness and sense of humor. These are the real victims of the Zodiac killer, and their stories serve as a reminder of the human cost of his crimes. For their families, the pain of losing a loved one to such a brutal and unsolved murder has never faded, and they continue to hope that one day the Zodiac will be identified and they will finally get the closure they deserve. Over the years, the families of the victims have spoken out about their pain and their hope for justice. Michael Majow, the only surviving victim of the Zodiac's attacks, has dedicated his life to helping investigators solve the case, providing detailed testimony about the killer's appearance and demeanor. In interviews, Majow has spoken about the trauma of the attack and his desire to see the Zodiac brought to justice. Brian Hartnell, who survived the Lake Berryessa stabbing, has also spoken out about his experience, describing the Zodiac as a cold, calculating killer who showed no mercy. The families of the victims have also pushed for law enforcement to continue investigating the case, urging them to use new technology and follow up on every lead. Their perseverance and dedication have helped to keep the case in the public eye and ensure that the Zodiac is not forgotten. As we enter the second half of the 21st century, the Zodiac killer remains one of the most infamous, unsolved serial killer cases in history. Over 50 years have passed since his last known murder, and yet the mystery of his identity and motives continues to captivate the world. Law enforcement agencies continue to investigate. Amateur sleuths continue to search for clues, and the public continues to be fascinated by the enigma of the Zodiac. While it is possible that the Zodiac killer is no longer alive, and that his identity will never be known, there is still hope that one day new evidence will emerge. New technology will crack the unsolved ciphers, and the Zodiac will finally be unmasked. Until then, the Zodiac killer will remain a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that even in an age of advanced technology, and modern forensics, some mysteries remain unsolved, and some killers never face justice. To fully understand the enduring fascination with the Zodiac killer, we must consider the unique combination of elements that make his case so compelling. Unlike other serial killers who operated in the shadows and avoided attention, the Zodiac actively sought the spotlight, taunting authorities and the public with his letters and ciphers. He turned his killing spree into a twisted game, and his ability to evade capture for decades has made him a figure of both fear and intrigue. His crimes were brutal and random, targeting ordinary people in ordinary places, which made the public feel vulnerable and afraid. The fact that he was never caught has left a void in the collective consciousness, a question that has yet to be answered. Who was the Zodiac killer, and why did he kill? Another factor that contributes to the Zodiac's enduring legacy is the time period in which he operated. The late 1960s were a time of great social and cultural change in the United States, a time when people were questioning authority and fearing the unknown. The Zodiac's crimes tapped into this collective anxiety, representing a threat that could not be explained or contained. He was a faceless, nameless killer who could strike anywhere, at any time, and there was no way to protect oneself from him. This sense of helplessness and fear has lingered for decades, making the Zodiac case a touchstone for discussions about crime, safety, and the limits of law enforcement. The Zodiac's use of ciphers also adds to the mystery and fascination surrounding his case. Ciphers are inherently mysterious, and the fact that the Zodiac ciphers, except for the 408, remain unsolved suggests that he was a highly intelligent, calculating individual who took great pleasure in challenging others to uncover his secrets. The ciphers have become a symbol of the Zodiac's intelligence and arrogance, and they have inspired countless people to try to crack them, in the hope of uncovering the killer's identity. Even today, with advanced computer technology and sophisticated cryptography, the 340 cipher remains unsolved, a testament to the Zodiac's ingenuity and the complexity of his mind. In addition to his ciphers and taunts, the Zodiac's ability to maintain his anonymity for so long is another reason why his case remains so compelling. In an age where surveillance cameras, DNA testing, and advanced forensics make it difficult for criminals to remain anonymous, the Zodiac's ability to kill multiple people and evade capture for over 50 years is remarkable. It suggests that he was a master of deception, someone who knew how to cover his tracks and avoid detection. He was also likely someone who was able to blend into society, appearing to be an ordinary, unremarkable person, while secretly carrying out his brutal crimes. This duality, ordinary on the outside, evil on the inside, adds to the fear and fascination surrounding the Zodiac, as it suggests that anyone could be the killer, even someone you know. Over the years, numerous theories have been proposed about the Zodiac's motives. Some believe that he was driven by a desire for power and control, using murder to assert his dominance over others. Others believe that he was mentally ill, suffering from a personality disorder that led him to kill. Some have even suggested that the Zodiac was a member of a cult, or that he was carrying out a twisted religious mission based on his references to being reborn in paradise and having his victims become his slaves. However, without knowing the Zodiac's true identity, it is impossible to know for sure what motivated him to kill. His decoded message from the 408 cipher provides some insight into his psyche. He enjoyed killing, saw it as a form of entertainment, and believed that it would grant him power in the afterlife. But it does not explain why he started killing or why he stopped. This lack of clarity about his motives only adds to the mystery and makes the Zodiac case even more compelling. The Zodiac case has also had a significant impact on law enforcement and forensic science. In the wake of the Zodiac's crimes, law enforcement agencies began to adopt new techniques for investigating serial killers, including the use of profiling, handwriting analysis, and forensic DNA testing. The case highlighted the importance of sharing information between law enforcement agencies, as the Zodiac's crimes spanned multiple jurisdictions, and cooperation was essential to solving the case. It also led to advancements in cryptography and forensic technology, as investigators and cryptographers worked to crack the Zodiac ciphers and analyze the evidence left behind. While these advancements have helped to solve many other serial killer cases, they have not yet been able to solve the Zodiac case, but they have laid the groundwork for future investigations. In recent years, there has been a renewed interest in the Zodiac case, thanks in part to the popularity of true crime documentaries and podcasts. Shows like Serial and Making a Murderer have sparked a new generation's interest in unsolved cases, and the Zodiac case, with its mystery, intrigue, and unsolved ciphers, has become a favorite among true crime enthusiasts. This renewed interest has led to new leads and new theories, as amateur sleuths and investigators re-examine old evidence and use new technology to analyze it. For example, in 2018, a team of researchers used advanced imaging technology to analyze the Zodiac's letters, hoping to find hidden clues that had been missed by previous investigators. While they did not find any new evidence, their work helped to keep the case in the public eye and inspired others to continue the search for the truth. Another development in recent years is the use of social media to share information and discuss the Zodiac case. Online forums and social media groups dedicated to the Zodiac have become popular, allowing amateur sleuths from around the world to connect, share theories, and analyze evidence. These groups have become a valuable resource for investigators, as they often uncover new leads and bring attention to details that law enforcement may have missed. For example, in 2020, a group of amateur sleuths claimed to have found a hidden message in the Zodiac's 340 cipher, using a combination of computer algorithms and manual analysis. While their claim was not confirmed by experts, it generated widespread attention and sparked new debates about the cipher's meaning. This kind of grassroots investigation has helped to keep the Zodiac case alive and ensure that it is not forgotten, despite the renewed interest and the advances in technology. The Zodiac case remains unsolved. The killer's identity remains a mystery. His motives are unknown, and his ciphers remain unbroken. However, this does not mean that the case is hopeless. Law enforcement agencies continue to investigate, and new technology continues to be developed that could help crack the case. For example, advances in DNA testing, such as forensic genealogy, have helped to solve other unsolved cases in recent years. And it is possible that this technology could one day be used to identify the Zodiac killer. Forensic genealogy uses DNA samples to trace a suspect's family tree, allowing investigators to identify relatives of the killer and eventually track down the killer himself. While this technology has not yet been successful in the Zodiac case, it remains a promising tool for future investigations. Another promising development is the ongoing work to crack the Zodiac's unsolved ciphers. In 2020, a team of amateur cryptographers claimed to have cracked the 340 cipher, but their solution was met with skepticism from experts. However, their work inspired other cryptographers to continue working on the cipher, and it is possible that one day someone will crack it, revealing the Zodiac's identity or motives. The 13-symbol cipher, which is much shorter, also remains unsolved, but it is possible that it contains a key clue that could help solve the case. Even a small piece of information from one of these ciphers could be enough to identify the Zodiac and bring him to justice. Even after all these years, the Zodiac killer's legacy is one of mystery, fear, and fascination. He was a brutal serial killer who took the lives of 5 innocent people, taunted authorities and the public, and evaded capture for decades. His case has inspired countless books, movies, and documentaries, and it has become a touchstone for discussions about crime, safety, and the limits of law enforcement. While the Zodiac's identity remains unknown, his story serves as a reminder of the importance of perseverance in the pursuit of justice and of the need to never forget the victims of violent crime. For the families of the Zodiac's victims, the search for justice continues, and they remain hopeful that one day the killer will be identified, and they will finally get the closure they deserve. As we look to the future, it is possible that the Zodiac case will one day be solved. Advances in technology, new leads, and the dedication of law enforcement and amateur sleuths may finally unmask the Zodiac killer and reveal the truth about his crimes. Until then, the Zodiac will remain a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that even in an age of advanced technology, some mysteries remain unsolved. But one thing is certain: the Zodiac killer will never be forgotten. His crimes, his taunts, and his mystery will continue to captivate the world for generations to come, ensuring that the victims of his brutality are never overlooked, and that the search for justice never ends. To delve deeper into the Zodiac case, it is important to examine the key evidence and clues that have been collected over the years, as well as the various theories that have been proposed to explain the killer's identity and motives. The 408 cipher, while cracked, provides a chilling insight into the Zodiac's psyche, revealing a man who enjoyed killing and saw himself as superior to his victims. The 340 cipher and the 13 symbol cipher, if cracked, could provide crucial information about the killer's identity, and they remain the subject of ongoing research and analysis. The witness descriptions, while detailed, have not been enough to identify a single suspect, but they have helped to create a profile of the Zodiac. A white male in his late 20s or early 30s at the time of the murders, stocky build, short brown hair, glasses, and a calm, calculating demeanor. The physical evidence, including the fingerprint on Paul Stein's taxi and the DNA samples from the Zodiac's letters, remains a key part of the investigation, and advances in forensic technology may one day allow investigators to use this evidence to identify the killer. The suspects in the case, from Arthur Lee Allen to Gary Francis Post, each have their own connections to the Zodiac's crimes, but none have been proven to be the killer. This highlights the difficulty of the case and the fact that the Zodiac was extremely careful in covering his tracks. It also suggests that the Zodiac may have been someone who was not on law enforcement's radar, someone who lived a quiet, ordinary life and never raised any suspicion. This possibility makes the case even more challenging, as it means that the killer could be anyone, and that the evidence needed to identify him may be hidden in places that investigators have not yet looked. Another important aspect of the Zodiac case is the role of the media. The Zodiac actively sought media attention, using newspapers to taunt authorities and the public, and the media's coverage of the case helped to keep it in the public eye. The publication of the Zodiac's letters and ciphers sparked a nationwide interest in the case, and it inspired countless people to try to solve the mystery. However, the media's coverage also had its downsides, as it led to hoaxes and false confessions, which diverted attention away from legitimate leads. Despite this, the media's role in the case cannot be overstated, as it helped to ensure that the Zodiac's crimes were not forgotten, and that the search for justice continued. The Zodiac case also raises important questions about the nature of serial killers and their motives. Serial killers are often driven by complex psychological factors, and the Zodiac's case is no exception. His decoded message from the 408 cipher suggests that he was motivated by a desire for pleasure and power, and that he believed in an afterlife where he would be rewarded for his crimes. This kind of twisted psyche is common among serial killers, who often have a sense of superiority and a lack of empathy for their victims. The Zodiac's case also highlights the importance of understanding the psychological profile of serial killers, as this can help law enforcement to identify and catch them. In conclusion, the Zodiac killer remains one of the most infamous unsolved serial killer cases in history. For over 50 years, he has haunted the collective consciousness of the United States, leaving a trail of victims, cryptic messages, and unanswered questions. His ability to evade capture, his use of ciphers and taunts, and his mysterious identity have made him a figure of fear and fascination, inspiring countless books, movies, and documentaries. While the case remains unsolved, there is still hope that one day new evidence will emerge, new technology will crack the unsolved ciphers, and the Zodiac killer will be identified. Until then, the Zodiac will remain a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that even in an age of advanced technology, some mysteries remain unsolved, and some killers never face justice. But the search for the truth continues, driven by the dedication of law enforcement, amateur sleuths, and the families of the victims, who refuse to let the Zodiac's crimes be forgotten. The Zodiac killer may have never been caught, but his story will continue to be told, ensuring that his victims are remembered and that the pursuit of justice never ends. As we reflect on the Zodiac case, it is important to remember that behind the mystery and the fascination are real people, victims who lost their lives, families who lost their loved ones, and survivors who were left with physical and emotional scars. The Zodiac's crimes were not just a twisted game. They were acts of unspeakable violence that destroyed lives and shattered communities. While the search for the Zodiac's identity is important, it is equally important to honor the memory of his victims and to support their families. For them, the pain of loss is still fresh, and the desire for justice is as strong as ever. It is our hope that one day they will get the closure they deserve, and that the Zodiac killer will finally be held accountable for his crimes. In the end, the Zodiac killer's legacy is not just one of mystery and fear, but also of resilience and perseverance. The fact that the case remains open after over 50 years is a testament to the dedication of those who have worked to solve it, and to the public's ongoing interest in finding the truth. While the Zodiac may have evaded capture in life, he will never be able to escape the shadow of his crimes, and the search for justice will continue until his identity is revealed. The Zodiac killer may be a mystery, but one thing is certain: he will never be forgotten, and the pursuit of justice for his victims will never end.